It's good to be back at the Council on Foreign Relations. As Pete mentioned, I've been a member for a long time and was actually a director for some period of time. I never mentioned that when I was campaigning for re-election back home in Wyoming.
And I am delighted to be here in these new headquarters. I have been often to, the mothership in New York City. But it's good to have an outpost of the council right here down the street from the State Department. We get a lot of advice from the council, so this will mean I won't have as far to go to be told what we should be doing and how we should think about the future.
World government is the structure necessary for global justice.
First, we Americans are going to have to yield up some of our sovereignty. That's going to be, to many, a bitter pill. Pat Robertson has written in a book a few years ago that we should have a world government, but only when the Messiah arrives. He wrote, literally, any attempt to achieve world order before that time must be the work of the devil. Well, join me. I'm glad to sit here at the right hand of Satan.
Welcome back to another edition of the Prepper Recon Podcast. We're going to fight them off. A United Nations Army couldn't hold us back. Whether your plan is to bug out or bug in, CampingSurvival.com has all of your preparedness needs, including fish antibiotics, long-term storage food, water filters, bug-out bags, and first aid kits. Use coupon code PrepperRecon for 5% off your entire order at CampingSurvival.com.
Hello, Kim Jong speaking.
Kim, is Vlad Putin. I have calling for RSVP about birthday party for you. I don't know what to bring it. I having some Soviet-era warhead. Little rusty, but could be cleaned.
No, I have already. I want Mali-compatible individual first aid kit from the PrepperRecon.com. It has everything for traumatic injury. Tourniquet, IBD, quick clot, suture kit, EMT shears, and chest seal. And so easy for bite. Go to PrepperRecon.com and click Store tab at the top of the home page. $89 includes shipping.
Okay, I buy for you. They have many tactical color. Do you preferring coyote, OD green, ACU, or black?
How about you surprise me?
Okay, I make surprise. But don't surprising me with those kimchi rolls again. Last time I eat, I had to leave in G20 early. And other thing, if Rodman wears miniskirt to party, I leaving.
Today's guest is Cal Wilson. Cal is the author of the new book, Dirt Cheap Valuable Prepping. Cal, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me on your show.
Oh, absolutely. It's nice to have you on. Now, when did you first wake up to the need to prepare?
Well, I've been one of those kind of recalcitrant preppers for a long time. And my wife was really the more of the prepper than me, but there was one event, November 2012, that really got me motivated, and since then I've been a pretty amped up prepper. And in fact, during that time, I've noticed there are a lot of books and a lot of podcasts that don't really cover what I think, some of my ideas. So that's why I put this book together.
That's fantastic. Now, what was the event in 2012 that woke you up?
Well, try not to get too political here, but a certain president who will go unnamed got reelected, and I just remember that night thinking, this is not going to last. I think it's your website that shows the cumulative debt that our country's facing. And it only hit 18 trillion just a couple months ago. Now it's already at 18.1. And apparently we have a government in place that just doesn't care. And when you get debt that high in relation to the economy, it's just not sustainable. It's not, if you picture a XY axis and, cumulative debt per time, it's not going to be a straight line. It's going to start going up, and it's going to get steeper and steeper and go exponential. And so anyway, that's what got me going. It's kind of funny, with Amazon, you can look back in your previous purchases And my purchases, 2009, 10, and 11, and most of 2012 is, mostly just kind of books, DVDs, whatever. But then late 2012, it just turned on a dime, and I started buying all the prepper stuff. Backpack, knives, everything essential. Batteries, flashlights, a lot of that stuff I talk about in this book.
Yeah, because this guy's still got plenty of time to absolutely devastate our national debt. When he came into office, it was 10 trillion. So it's looking like he will have doubled it in that 8-year period that he's in office. He could easily hit 20 trillion before he gets out, and that will mean that he has overspent more than all the other presidents prior, from George Washington to George Bush. He will have overspent more than all of those guys, and it's terrifying. And and I think that you are right to be alarmed that the country would and I think that that's a barometer for the mentality of the country. I think that it shows that the re-education camps that we call public schools have been successful in completely dumbing down the American public to where they know nothing about money, nothing about the founding principles of this country, and I think that it's just a sign of absolute deterioration. And I think that there's very, very, we always want to be hopeful and hope for the best, but it's not very encouraging when you look at the fact that of what Barack Obama did in his first term, and that the country would actually put him in again. Yeah, I think you're right to be terrified. Now, tell us a little bit more about the book.
Yeah, thanks. The book has, I read a lot of prepper books and listen to podcasts and so forth myself, and I've just noticed there are a number of ideas I had that were never really addressed in other books, and I just figure you're going to write a prepper book, make it different. Don't just make it the same list of things to accumulate. And so I've kind of ranked it in order of, what's cheap now that will be extremely valuable later, if, God forbid, if society collapses or whatever. So it's kind of an attempt at prioritizing things. I think there's always a buy list. There's always a list of things that everybody has to get in order to be prepared. This kind of prioritizes things in terms of what's really cheap right now versus what will be extremely valuable later. Like salt is the first thing I talk about, and that's something extremely cheap nowadays. And I talked about in the dollar store, salt is the only thing that costs less than $1. And yet it's going to be so important, in the end times when things collapse or in a long-term grid down situation. And that and spices, I threw in water, so forth. I think this is just kind of different stuff that you don't normally read about in other prepper books. Here's some athlete's foot and jock itch cream. That's very cheap right now, but if you've got thousands of people out there, going without bathing for a long time, that's a lot of skin fungus that's going to make people in serious pain. Like I wrote in the book, I had just athlete's foot for a week, and that was extremely painful. And all it took was that cream that I paid 88 cents for at Walmart. So it's kind of it's a book that has just different stuff in it. And as you and I were talking about earlier, that I think there's a little bit of humor in it too. So it kind of makes it a little bit easier to read and get through. I don't think there are any other prepper books out there that invoke the movie Blazing Saddles, for example, stuff like that.
Yeah. And now, salt's a great point. There's been empires built around the ideology of salt, and it's always been such a valuable commodity. And it's just recently that through modern production capacities and capabilities that it's so cheap, like you said.
Yeah, it's amazing how cheap it is. At the dollar store we went to, it's 54 cents, and I think that's the only item in the dollar store that costs less than $1. It's all you're paying for is just packaging and transportation. But it's just so completely cheap right now, and we're stocking up on it big time. And I know if there's a longer-term disaster, we're going to put it to good use, and it's going to be an important prep in our stockpile.
Do you think it's a common misconception that prepping has to be expensive?
Yeah, definitely. And that's why, I pointed out in the epilogue that your website has the coupon corner that will enable somebody who is stockpiling their preps to spend very little on this stuff. And I think that's really important. If you buy all this stuff and you never need it, then, so what? You've got some stuff that you bought that you don't need. And it's so much the better if you paid next to nothing for it. So that's why I think, that section on your website, the coupon corner, is a great idea. And all of this stuff you can get for really cheap. Towards the end, I talked about night vision. That's not cheap. But that's kind of a force multiplier, that whatever you pay for night vision someday will make just a world of difference.
Yeah,
that's and a lot of the stuff too. I did include a couple of things like water. The more I've read prepper books and including fictional books as well, and watch prepper movies and so forth, it's amazing to me how water is kind of treated like just another thing to put on the list, but it's really the most important thing. Nothing else matters without water. If you can have the most ammo, the most bullets, the best land and clothing and food, everything. Nothing else matters unless you have water taken care of. So that's why I talked about water in that one of the first chapters there.
Yeah, and people really, really take that for granted. And we've seen some really bad episodes recently with entire cities having their water contaminated. I think it was about 2 years ago that West Virginia, there was a leak from a coal mine chemical plant, and the leak went into the water system, and there was no type of filtration that would take care of that because the chemical was in it, and you either had to have stored water or catch rain, or that was your only two options. You couldn't take anything from the water table. So, and people were fighting, and they were in the grocery store fighting over bottled water in America, in West Virginia.
Yeah. And we had a disaster here recently, and I remember driving into town, and I thought, I'll bring a couple of cases of bottled water. And that just flew. In times of disaster, that's like the first thing people want is a bottle of water or some kind of fresh water. And yet you can pay, $4 to $5 for a case of water, a case of bottled water, and then just put it in your closet or your garage, and it's ready to go. So that's another thing people should stock up on, and it's pretty cheap nowadays.
It is, and you can use old juice bottles or old soda pop bottles or those Arizona iced tea bottles, anything that's got that high grade thick plastic. Milk jugs don't work real good because the plastic's so thin on those, and if you don't have anything else, and you've got an outdoor place to where it's not going to ruin anything when they leak, because they will leak. A milk jug's better than nothing, but. There's certainly you can reuse other food grade containers to store water for people that are on a lower budget, and you can get the big gallon jugs of water, for $69 for I think they have those at the dollar store for $1.
Yeah, I talked about this at some point. I think the name, the brand is Crystal Geyser.
Yeah.
Where it's a 1 gallon jug, and it's kind of that clear plastic, and it looks like a handle has been just taped to the top of it. And from what I can tell, that plastic is pretty thick, so it'll last, but also has a screw top, which is kind of rare among the bottled water, the gallon bottled water out there. So yeah, that's a good idea as well. I covered that in the section on containers, and I mentioned that in trash too. That a lot of people, if you just look over, if you look over your trash before you put out to the driveway or however you empty it, and just go through stuff and just see, wait a minute, why are we throwing this away? We can keep that and store something in it. So that's another thing, if you ever have a gallon jug of water, and you think about throwing away the container, think again. If it's got a screw top on it, you can clean that out and put in pinto beans and seal it up pretty good, and then that's a good prep there. We do that with soda pop bottles too.
Yeah. Now, if a person doesn't do any planning or put any thought into their preps, it can get very, very expensive. Isn't that right?
Yes. Now's the time. Before there's an extreme urgency right over the horizon. So that's why I think it's good to plan ahead. One thing I mentioned, and I don't see this discussed anywhere else, is the idea of junk land. And everybody talks about junk silver, which is great. Silver coins made before 1965, whatever. But people should be thinking also about a retreat location. And what I recommend in this book is something, I call it junk land, where it's not 10 to 20 to 30 acres right off of the interstate, half an hour outside of town. Because that type of property, there's going to be a horde of people leaving town on the interstate, and they're going to be looking around and saying, "Oh, I might settle here," and that would be your property, and so you're going to have to try to ward off who knows how many people who want to settle in on your property. But I call it junk land, where it's like 2 hours drive out of town, and then take an exit, drive another hour on some smaller road, and then take a third exit and another 15 minutes on that road. So you're way far away from the main interstate, and I call it junk land. It's raw land. There's nothing there, and so long as you have dirt, access to the local road, it's a good place to start setting up your retreat location. And that's something that it's pretty cheap to do, because nobody else wants the land. There's nothing there. And a lot of times you can get owner financing for this property. So that's another thing I mentioned in the book in that chapter called Junk Land.
It's time for a quick break, and we'll be right back. The dollar's lost over 90% of its purchasing power since 1971. Silver, on the other hand, has proved to be a very stable form of wealth preservation over the years. And where do you buy silver? Silver.com, of course. Silver.com offers fantastic prices on silver and gold. Check out Silver.com today.
Prepping for the apocalypse can be expensive, but it doesn't have to be. The new book, Dirt Cheap Valuable Prepping by Cal Wilson, focuses on inexpensive ways to make the most out of your survival budget. Don't create your own financial crisis long before the collapse. Get your copy of Dirt Cheap Valuable Prepping for Kindle or in paperback at Amazon.com. Back to economics. Janet Yellen's just announced that rates aren't going up anytime soon. That punishes savers who would be getting interest if rates were normalized, but it also signals that the economy isn't quite as strong as what we're being told. Where do you think we're headed economically?
Yeah, that's a good point. The Fed, if things are really taken off like as is being reported, then it would be incumbent upon the Fed to raise rates, to make sure that inflation doesn't set in, if that's an issue. But apparently it's not. If they know we're not going to worry about, we don't have to worry about inflation anytime soon, then obviously the people who really study the fine print of the economy, they know that this economy is just tepid at best. And inflation right now, the figure doesn't cover, the basics. It covers other things, but it's not a good economy right now, and I don't think it'll get. I don't see anything on the horizon that's making it better. And same for that's what the Fed. That's what it has influenced their judgment as well too.
And another thing I think's got everybody in America concerned are our southern borders, because they're wide open. Now, the two people that I think that there are the two classes of people that the borders are wide open to that I think have most people concerned are new welfare recipients, or some people would like to call them undocumented Democrats, and terrorists. And yeah. I honestly don't know which one's more dangerous. Which one of those has you the most concerned?
Yeah, the terrorists, definitely. The undocumented Democrats, I saw that report the other day that you can illegally enter this country and start filing for earned income tax credit, which is kind of like a reward for coming over here. It's
absolutely, and a punishment to the people that had to pay the taxes that you're getting that wealth transfer check from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yet the people who get this benefit, well, maybe not the immigrants, but the lower, the 47% that Mitt Romney talked about, they're not thinking about thanking us. They're complaining that we're not paying even more in taxes. So it's kind of a depressing economic situation here.
It is, and I think that, and I'm not a big Romney fan at all, but I think that on that comment, I think he was spot on. And I think that's kind of the big political conundrum for any conservative or anybody that wants to try to get, and I'm as much of a critic of the warfare state as I am the welfare state, because I think they're both bankrupting us simultaneously. But for any conservative that wants to get in there and fight back against that welfare spending, they've got a really tough row to hoe, because they've already got that solid base of 47% that will never vote any other way. So the opposition, all they have to do is pull another 4%, and they've got the majority.
Yeah. I can't remember, there was somebody back in the Founding Fathers who commented on that when you finally get the country in the situation where a majority of people are getting benefits at the expense of those few who are working and paying taxes, then we're in really bad shape.
Yeah. As soon as a democracy figures out that it can vote itself money, it'll destroy itself. I think it was something to that effect.
Yeah,
and I think that's why our founders set this nation up to be a republic, but that's long gone.
Yeah, it's pretty depressing, and the just to add a little more depression in the conversation here, Jeb Bush, who I'm not too crazy about, looks like all you have to do is win the first 3 or 4 primaries, and that's it. And Jeb Bush has the biggest war chest, so. We might be in a situation again in 2016 where we're just trying to vote for the lesser of two evils.
Yeah, and I did that in the last election, and I've put out the call that I'm not going to do it this time. If I don't get a Rand Paul or somebody that I can legitimately get behind in the primaries, if I don't get somebody like that, I'm not going to cave in. I'll write in another candidate if I don't have a good choice. I'm not going to vote for the lesser of two evils again. I did it last time, and I won't do it again. And I'm putting that call out to the rest of my fellow conservatives and fellow liberty-loving people out there, and all the listeners I'm not going to cave, and I'm hoping that enough of us could get to the point to where we'll say we will not cave, even if it means a Hillary, even if it means a third term for Obama. We're not going to cave and vote for the cleanest dirty shirt again, and so we'll demand from the rest of the Republican Party that they put a true conservative in there and not just another rhino and not another neocon or another Bush. because my goodness, I mean, while he would be the first Bush ever to come into office that's not a member of the Skull and Bones, I'm just not going to vote for him.
Well, when you think about it, when was the last time we really had a true conservative running for president? And I know Ronald Reagan was not perfect, but I think he was a real conservative and a fighter. And I think he was a real middle class person. That's where his loyalties were. And again, he wasn't perfect, but I think that was the last time we had a true conservative instead of the milquetoast types who have been running lately.
Well, I'd certainly take him over a Christie or a Romney or a Bush.
Oh wow, yeah, yeah. It's 2016 is looking kind of depressing in that respect. 2008, it was all wrapped up for McCain as of the South Carolina primary, and that was, I think, the third primary. So it could happen pretty quick, where somebody, possibly Jeb Bush, wins the first two or three, and then everybody just throws up their hands and says, okay, we're done. I guess he's the nominee. Could be pretty scary.
Now, do you think that there's people out there that think because they can't do everything when it comes to prepping, they can't afford to, to buy the gold coins and to get the night vision and to, get the tricked out AR and the underground bunker in the mountains, because they can't afford to do everything, they choose to do nothing? Do you think that that's a problem?
Yeah. And that's why towards the end of the book I talk about just stay educated and keep reading good books like this one, of course, and listen to podcasts like yours and watch TV shows and movies that have, I think, prepper themes in them. One of my favorite movies in the prepper genre was from the early 60s called Panic in Year Zero. And that kind of got me thinking, what would happen, if I was facing some kind of a disaster. And it doesn't matter what type of disaster the movie portrays, but stuff like that gets people motivated. It'll kind of get you up off the couch and get you motivated to start prepping. And I think I've got a list of some stuff to start prepping with here in the book. Not only spices, but salt, water, bottled water. I have a section on dorky-looking cars. Stuff like that. And it doesn't have to be expensive. I think it's a good list, and it explains why it's important. Another thing like beehives, as I wrote in the book, beehives help your garden with pollinating, but also they crank out the honey, and that would be something good to have stockpiled, and you can use it to sweeten your food or to trade, barter with, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, natural sugars are big. My grandmother lived through the Depression. She's going to be 102 this year. So she's been around for a while, and during the Depression, nobody really had sugar, and then there were sugar rations. And so one of the things that they did is they made sorghum out of sorghum cane, which is very similar to, looks like sugar cane, but what it makes is it doesn't have the proper amount of sucrose or whatever to crystallize like sugar. But as far as that sorghum syrup, it was a big thing, and she used that as to barter for meat and grains and other things that she might need that other people had that they wanted the sorghum that they were producing. And honey's the same thing, it's a sweetener, and that's something that doesn't go bad too. So it's something that they found honey in the pyramids that was still edible.
Yeah. I was looking around. I heard that too, and I was looking around for a Snopes article or something saying, "Oh, that's just not true. Forget it." But it really is true that honey was found in the tombs, and I think it was crystallized. But once you warm it up a little bit, it's perfectly edible. So honey has almost an unlimited shelf life. I think it would help if you put it in the shade, of course. But that's something that you can store for a long time. And also, honey is a natural antibiotic and antifungal things too. So there's kind of different uses to have for honey. So yeah, I recommend people have beehives and stock up on honey. That's an easy thing to stockpile on. And getting back to your grandmother, it's amazing how just only a few generations ago, prepping was not called prepping, of course, but that was just how people lived. They accumulated stuff that they can use today or next month or whatever, and everybody lived off the grid, and they lived okay.
And you have a chapter in the book that's dedicated to getting used camping supplies like tents, and sleeping bags, and clothing, and things like that. Can you give us some tips on where to look for that stuff?
Yep. I was writing that a few months ago when I saw this kind of sad news report on the homeless people and trying to live in the freezing temperatures. And how they were all getting sick, and some of them had pneumonia, that kind of thing. And the newscaster suggested that we all donate to Salvation Army and Goodwill, and that the homeless people look for that stuff to buy at Salvation Army and Goodwill. So that's a good place to start. In my case, I was looking for a sleeping bag a couple years ago for a camping trip. And, I started off at REI, and I wanted a big, nice down sleeping bag. And, we're talking $200-300. And so then I went on eBay, and I looked up used sleeping bag. And I just figured, if it smells bad or if it's cigarette smoke or whatever, I'll just get it dry cleaned. But I think I paid $15 for that sleeping bag, and it was used, and you'd never tell. You could never tell just by looking at it and using it that it was actually used. So that was a great savings, just to find stuff on eBay that's used.
Cal, you've given us a lot of great information, a lot of great tips and things to think about in trying to prep affordably, and I think that's fantastic that you've got this book out. Now, where can folks go to find the book? Of course, we'll have a link to purchase it on PrepperRecon.com, but where else can they find it?
Well, I tell people it's available wherever fine books are sold, so long as we're talking about Amazon. Amazon, both the paperback and the Kindle are available. The paperback is, I believe, $7.99. Kindle is $3. So yeah, that's where they're available. And you're right. I think we're going to have a link on your website there. So yeah, it's been a fun book to write, and I enjoyed adding to the discussion. And I hope that the prepper community start considering some of these different things that are in this book. And thanks for having me on.
Cal, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show today.
Yeah, thank you. Enjoyed it.
Are we living in a time of which there is more prophetic writings than of any period in history? Watch through the eyes of Noah Parker and his family as a global empire takes shape. Ancient writings are fulfilled, and the last days fall upon the once great United States of America. The Days of Noah, Book 1, Conspiracy by Mark Goodwin, is a fast-paced fiction thriller which looks at how modern conspiracies could play into biblical prophecy concerning end times. Buy The Days of Noah in paperback, Kindle, or audio edition at Amazon.com today.